Howdy, and welcome to a Warcraft Logs introduction. My name is Baz the Healer, and there's a lot of benefit to using logs. There's a lot of players out there who are learning a spec for the first time. Maybe they homebrewed their own build, maybe they have their own idea of how things work, they read a guide, you know, whatever it is. And then they want to figure out how to play it in Raid versus Mythic Plus, or they want to go from being a Raider to being able to do dungeons, and they want to know better how to play whatever it is that they picked. So we're going to kind of go through it on a basic level, starting with things that everyone needs to hear, but going DPS, tank, then healer. The reason is all the information I talk about for all three roles is going to be relevant. Just DPS has it the easiest, so we can kind of start on a beginner level with them and then move our way down. You're not going to want to just jump and find a healer section when all of the information before it is going to be very useful. That being said, you can spend your whole life on this website, warcraftlogs.com. I'll have a link to it down below, and you can get unbelievably into the weeds, but this one's meant to be a bit of a more topical look as to what to do here and even what I do here and how that can help you learn. And let's dive right into it. Okay, so why would you want to use a resource like Warcraft Logs compared to a guide? Listen, I'm a guide writer. I would love for you to watch my guides or watch Megaset or Automatic Jack's guides, right? They're good. It's good to have a teacher walk you through their perspective on how to play something or meet you where you're at. For instance, I specialize a lot on the new player experience and on pugging, the idea of playing with groups that are going to inherently play a little imperfect, and what you need to know to do that. However, go check out Megaset or Automatic Jack when they talk about their respective healers. What they're going to tell you sometimes also includes their perspective as players who play in high-end groups with coordinated teams. That is a different playstyle, so you get different information, and that is very potent information. However, Warcraft Logs shows you what everyone's been doing in World of Warcraft that has uploaded a log. They get all the juicy information. This doesn't give you the full perspective, like there might be some off-meta or hidden compositions of teams just waiting to be known of, waiting to be put on the radar, but you'll see off-meta and meta specs that are clearing content and doing well, and we'll go through all of that information in just a moment. Now, before we get really into the weeds, just note we are going to talk raids and dungeons, but dungeons are kind of an easier place to start because dungeons and Mythic Plus data it's not more set in stone, so to say, but you are changing your build sometimes from boss to boss in raid, whereas in Mythic Plus, there's a lot of similarities between places, so I think it's the easier place to just begin for right now, but don't worry, we'll be talking all about raids. And before we talk about roles and anything like that, just start by picking a dungeon that either you struggle with or a dungeon that you know has a good mix of AoE pulls and single target boss fights. Something that kind of gives you a wide range of things that a player has to do. I really like Magister's Terrace for this. An argument can be made for Algathar Academy that Algathar Academy is a good option, but it does have that crazy first pull that can lead to misleading numbers. So I tend to go Magisters, but like when I'm on tank, I struggle with Seat of the Triumvirate sometimes. So I like to go here and just go like, okay, what's going on? Like, am I doing something wrong? Or like, is there a better build I could be playing? And thus I do go for the harder dungeon in that regard. But let's do Magister's Terrace to keep it easy. When you first enter the screen, you're going to see a whole lot of data. You're going to see points, the dungeon, regions, classes, factions, keystones, affixes, etc. Once you're here, this is a nice place to just kind of get a glance at what's going on. You're going to see the most popular specs and the best performers. Points means clear speed, essentially. How fast they clear depends on how many points you get. For DPS players, you can just sort by damage to start. The reason DPS Your Life is so easy in logs is that while you can get into the weeds on things, more is more and more damage is always better. And while it's hard to compare yourself to a 22 if you're only starting to do 10s, like you might be like, wow, I can't do 276,000 DPS per second. Well, that's because they're pulling like massive pulls and working and coordinating all of their cooldowns, so they're going to do more damage than you. But a lot of the times, looking at a high damage player is a good way to figure it out. Now, I'm going to talk about Unholy for our damage here because it's a spec that I've been learning. I love Necromancers, so I wanted to start here. However, if you were looking for a specific class, you can do it this way, where let's say I want to find Chrono Warden players, because Chrono Warden is not the more popular spec. You can see we can go to Augmentation, we can check a heat map, and we can see what people are taking in general and kind of what talents are really popular right now. And you can see 100% of players are playing Scale Commander. Oh, well, that probably means it's pretty strong. But let's say I'm determined, I love Chrono Warden. I mean, I like Scale Commander more, but let's pretend I like Chrono Warden more. I can go search by the hero tree and get a sense of what players are doing on Chrono Warden. And I can see some of these numbers are totally respectable, and they're doing some pretty high key levels. If I'm in sub 16 territory, I can clearly get away with running myself a Chrono Warden. So maybe this is something that I do. And now I always like to cross-reference multiple guides, but I can click on these and kind of bring up a proper log. If it shows you all their talents and everything, that means that the log is available. If you want to see what a specific player used, you can click and see exactly their build. You can go and export it immediately. If you want more information, we're going to have to click in. But let's go to our example of Unholy, because I think that's going to be a very illuminating one. And we'll go back to XMDW, who I used in a different recording of this video that got scrapped. So we'll use XMDW again. And now we can see this run. It'll bring us to the damage done page because that's what we were sorting by. And we can see how everyone did here, right? It looks like a pretty standard log. Looks pretty normal, looks pretty strong too. Like, who's complaining about those numbers? First things first, you can go to summary and kind of get all the stats at a glance. You can really quickly just look at everyone and what they were doing. That's very useful. Then you can also select a specific player to see them. Once again, this is going to give us a very quick rundown of everything. We can look at their talents. Once again, we can see their gear, what they have equipped, even their enchants and whatnot, right? Weapon has Rune of the Apocalypse. All right, very good to know. And then we can see up here, these are all the various lines: damage done, damage taken, healing done. You can get a sense of just how much they were popping off in Lust. And this poll, whatever happened here, it wasn't during Bloodlust, and it was the largest amount of damage that they did in the dungeon. Whoa, that's pretty cool. I wonder what happened there. I wonder what made this happen. And that is something that you could do. You can actually zoom into a section and get a sense of what went on during that moment. Also, this is where you check your stats. So if you want to cross-reference stats, this is a great place to do it. Unholy, running a massive amount of mastery and create, like, I don't have 3,000 mastery. Like, what do you mean? But that's important. Now I know that the mastery scaling is important. I wouldn't just reference one player's stats though. I'd bring up like more than a few players and see what they had and what they were doing. And actually, when I did this earlier, I found a Unholy player that has 1,000 mastery and like 2,000 something critical. And I went, what? But okay, they're clearly doing insane damage. So it gave me something to think about as to how much the mastery versus the crit must be weighing in on the damage. But I don't have anywhere near these stats. So I'm going to be a little bit kind to myself when comparing myself to a DPS of this caliber. If I'm in a 22, I'm probably doing similar damage due to the pulls, and then the rest will be the optimization of my gear and my stat weights alongside my play. So we're going to look at mostly the play side of this, but just be kind to yourself, right? If you're not in a 22, then comparing yourself to a 22 is a slightly unfair thing to do to yourself. By the way, when you do zoom in to a group like this, there's supposed to be a reset button. I can't ever see it for whatever reason. Maybe I'm blind and you can all make fun of me, but I just go up here and I change the URL, and I changed said URL to not say start and end in source. I just kind of do that, restart it, and then we're back. And I'll have to edit that to not show my email address. It's my professional email, people can know. So let's go back to our player and let's go to damage done. You can go to healing as well here. This is going to be more useful for healers later, but I just want to know if you're like, man, why is this other Death Knight always tankier than me? The healing done group might do a lot for you. And note, you can track buffs and debuffs. So if you want to know very specifically, like how much a buff is doing for you or how much you were able to keep it up, how many times it procced, you can get that information from here, but that's a little overkill for what we're doing today. Wow, look at all this damage. We can see everything that's going on here and very quickly assess where the damage is on Unholy right now. Rider's Champion's the hero talent, and yeah, spending runes has a chance to call forth the aid of a horseman for 10 seconds. This obviously happened a lot of time if there were 18,000 hits, and if we hit the drop down here, we could see specifically what moves from the horse riders was doing the most, and them casting Epidemic obviously being one of our major spells. I think that makes a whole lot of sense to me, how much damage it's doing. But I know that it's very important to be spending runes. You can use that information to go like, oh yeah, if I'm in a drought where I'm not really pressing my runes, but I could be hitting like a Scourge Strike, for instance, then maybe that's something that you can do to add to your play. Like, oh yeah, I could just cycle more runes a little more often when I'm in my cooldowns, because sometimes you're waiting for a sudden doom proc. And so there's this whole world where, oh yeah, you know, maybe your runic spending could be better. But there's more to it. We know Graveyard is an upgraded version of Epidemic, so we can kind of look at Epidemic and Graveyard and go, damn, that's a whole lot of damage between those moves. So I know that that's a major amount of damage. I also know that Necrotic Coil and Death Coil are single target spenders, and so they're obviously a little bit lower on my bar, but it's good to think about. In a boss fight, these might be the buttons I'm pressing more often, and I can always go check in a boss fight to see kind of what that is. You might be going, how do I find out where the boss fight is? You can actually watch a replay. You can genuinely go and watch a replay here. It's just a top down of the map, and it shows the abilities everyone's casting and at what times, but it's super useful information. So I highly recommend using the replay feature if you want to really dive into this. But Army of the Damned, Putrefy, yeah, this makes sense. This is Army of the Dead damage. Putrefy is from sacking one of your ghouls and blowing them up. Cool. Lesser Ghoul was a lot of damage. And this is the very interesting one. Lesser Ghoul's a lot of damage, and if I look in, notice that a good amount of it is Sweeping Claws. If you read the Sweeping Claws, you attack an enemy and deal shadow damage to them, and shadow damage to nearby enemies. Oh, when I was first learning, I realized that I was missing this component. My damage would sometimes fall off, and I wasn't sure why I was losing damage. Then it occurred to me, I play a lot of Devastation Evoker. I like to hit the target, like the one-off target that's kind of out of range, and thus all of my minions are running over there and not hitting their cleave. Oh my goodness, all these like minions of mine are now attacking a single target rather than attacking the pack of enemies. So I need to be careful as to where I'm swinging as an unholy, because this cleave actually does seem to matter. And yeah, that actually, like, well, there's a lot more abilities that work that way, where having my minions and considering where my minions are is important. Seat of the Triumvirate's first boss summons these goops, right? And the goops can be like very annoying to deal with, but if I want to swap and kill the goop, which I absolutely have to do, right? We can't let it touch the boss. My minion has to physically run over to the goop and start swinging. Okay, well, if my minion has to go and do that, then how am then I'm losing damage on the boss. I'm losing travel time on the minion running over there. And all of that starts to make sense as to maybe where I was losing some of my damage. So that's just a good example of kind of how deep you can go into this. And there's a lot more to go for, but let's check out the raid side of this. Once again, pick a raid, right? Pick a fight. And then it is worth noting the Mythic run is usually a great way to go, because the players clearing Mythic this easily and doing this much damage are probably worth getting your data from. But if you want some more accurate data, not only grab from here, but cross-reference maybe the difficulty that you're struggling on. My community team, my little casual weekend guild, they're running in Powerwood Furry. It's in my guild. They're currently starting their prog on Heroic Crown of the Cosmos. So maybe it makes a little more sense to go to Heroic, and if our group's average item level's low, let's say it was like 272, this might give me a better idea of what I'm going to be doing. And then furthermore, there's some really complicated parts of this. I want to go to Fallen King, Salad Bar, right? Let's look at all item levels again, and let's go back to Mythic. Salad Bar has ads that pop up in the fight. The ads can really add to the damage. Like, notice these Shadow Priest players. I can tell you right now that Psychic Link is doing damage to both the boss and the available orbs, so they can actually hit all of them. To really make sure you're not losing your mind, on bosses where it matters, you can go to damage to bosses to get a much cleaner idea of what's happening. And then furthermore, there might be a lot of PIs going out. If you don't want those external buffs, you can exclude them, just to include the raw numbers. Now I have a much better idea of what's going on here. And Verb here did a really impressive 134,000 to boss. So I can click in and get a sense of that. Again, I can see the whole party, see kind of what the damage landscape looked like. Look, there were 2 unholies in here, so I can actually compare between 2 different players. I can get their stats all the same, and we can go and check out their damage done. We can see how much Putrefy was doing. Army of the Damned, Lesser Ghoul, all doing similar to Riders, but notice how much cleaner that is, how much closer it is. Good to know. And look at how much more Necrotic Coil and Death Coil are contributing in a more single target oriented fight. I don't actually, yeah, Epidemics down here is pressed 1 time in the entire fight. So we're not even pressing Epidemic unless a rare scenario where Epidemic would do more damage pops up. And this might have been like a fumble. This might have been like a misinput, right? It did 48 damage per second. So we're going to assume probably a fumble. However, this tells me a lot more. And because we didn't go over it earlier, we can check the timeline. This can look insane, by the way. This can look crazy, but you can filter out and in certain moves if you don't want to see it, but you can see the activation of every effect and what was going off. So you can have an idea of like, hey, where's the first Scourge Strike? Oh, it's here. Oh, okay. So it was like 6 seconds in, they're pressing their first Scourge Strike. Okay, good to know. And this is Rider's Champion Scourge Strike. Where's our Scourge Strike? Oh, that's a fantastic question. Here's Scourge Strike. So our first Scourge Strike is almost at 8 seconds. Oh, that's really useful to know. They took a lot of time to set up there. And if I want to watch the setup in full, I can go to the replay where I can go and find our player. Once it loads, I can go and find Verb, and I can even watch this at half speed. And now we can go and watch the fight, and we can see how they open in the moves they use, who they're targeting, and the buffs they get. And yeah, I can watch through this. I can even slow it down and kind of get a better sense of what buttons they're pressing in what order and how important they must be. And yeah, I can even track things like those sudden doom procs. When I see a sudden doom proc pop up here, I can know how important that was to Verb, or how long Verb sat on one of these versus two of these, and how quickly it was sent. And wow, look at this. I have an idea of what's going on for damage. So damage dealers, your life is a little bit easy in that regard, in that you can just follow these guidelines and start figuring out what to do. Okay, tanks, on the other hand, we have a little bit more to do, and it more involves the cross-referencing side of this, so let's go do it. Back to Magister's Terrace. Let's say that we're playing Demon Hunter, we're playing Vengeance. First and foremost, what if you're me and you really like Eldrachi Reaver over Annihilator? I still like Annihilator, but I have a soft spot for Eldrachi Reaver. And well, someone did it, 1% of players, so you can go and look, or you can go and sort by the hero spec and find what you're looking for. However, you can just kind of go through here and let's cross-reference some logs. Remember, sometimes tanks have different stat weights, maybe they're running different builds for survivability. I want a general sense of the landscape as to what they're doing. You can sort by damage here. You can also sort by healing if you want to pick out the players that kind of did the most work in this regard. I think Bella DH here did a great job from Scuffed, right? That's a lot of healing, so maybe I'll take a look at them. I already opened up their log, and we can see exactly what the damage was, right? That's a lot of tank damage. No one is saying no to that. And just like before, we get a sense of kind of what they were doing for damage and their general rotation. However, we also want to look at healing here and get a sense of what's going on here, right? Like kind of what's doing the most work here. Well, consume souls whenever you have a soul, right? A shattered soul out, or you overcap on your souls, you'll eat the souls and then you'll heal. So this is doing a lot of work for us. So is our soul barrier, our leech, metamorphosis itself, and frailty as an effect is doing a lot of heavy lifting. There's a new feature called mitigations, and I'll warn you that it's currently under development, so don't fully look at this. But even if we were to take this number at face value and not overanalyze it, Fiery Brand did a lot of work. And you know what? I don't play Vengeance too much this season, although I do plan on playing it more soon. And you know what? I'm pretty bad about using my Fiery Brand correctly. I like using it for damage, and I like just sending it because, well, I'm kind of used to being immortal, and we're a little less immortal now. And this would explain some of the hardships that I face and how much work it does. I know to focus more on the consume soul sides of things, and now I know to use Fiery Brand probably a little more intelligently than I know I've been using it. So I've now cracked some of the code, but I might want to cross-reference this with other tanks to see what they're doing. So cross-referencing stats though, we notice a good amount of crit, some versatility, a ton of haste, and where's the mastery? Well, there's no mastery. So this player has 0 mastery, or 0 meaningful mastery, that it's not even showing up here. Oh, that's pretty important. And I can keep going through some of these runs to kind of get a sense of what they were all running. So I can go once again to here, Bella DH, summary, and this player has a smattering of mastery, some versatility, a lot of haste, but more crit than the other player. Okay, good to know. I have an idea of what I should be focusing on here for stats. However, I can see that there's multiple weights here that work. This is even more important for healers, but I always like checking this as tanks, as recently I finally leveled my Prot Warrior, only to find out that there's high haste on everything, but it's, are you running haste mastery, or haste versatility, or haste crit? And there's a lot of people running a smattering of mastery and versatility, and some people still rocking the tried and true high haste, high crit from seasons prior and expansions prior. All of them are clearing 20s and 19s as a Prot Warrior. So, and hopefully I said Prot Warrior earlier and I didn't mess up, but you see what I mean? There can be a lot of variance to this data, so it's good to cross-reference. But while this is all useful and you can check buffs and even threat, and there's a lot of data here, we do want to think more about cross-referencing, because I'm not doing 20s, right? Like Bella there was doing incredible, but I'm not doing that. I might do a 12 on a good day, and I think I'm only doing 10s right now on my Vengeance. I'm playing other tanks right now. So if I want to get back into Vengeance, I want to find something a little more in line of what I'm doing. So one method of doing that is to, of course, lower the keystone level. But here I can start to see numbers in 10s. Now, when it comes to cross-referencing, here's another problem for tanks. And this happens with all specs, but tanks really get this. Is, are you supposed to be doing 134,000 DPS as a tank right now on Vengeance? No, I'll tell you right now, most Vengeance are not pulling this in their 10s. These are probably extremely strong players, and it doesn't take much to go and look at one of those extremely strong players to give you a sense of, yeah, they have quite a lot of gear on them, right? A lot of their gear is super strong. They're really powerful. Maybe they're pulling this super competitively too. Maybe this is a group that's playing more like MDI, right? Maybe they're practicing for the MDI into 10 and they're just doing some fun pulls. Maybe they're carrying a friend and having a good time. Who knows? So I might not want to search for these numbers. I might want to find something that's a little more relevant to what I'm doing, or to, you know, more middle of the pack. So you can scroll through and you can finding something more in the middle of the road. Like, we'll just take this random player. Okay, great. I can check their summary, and now I can get a sense of, look at their haste numbers and whatnot. It's nowhere near as high as the other players. I can see their combined item level, and I'm sort of like, oh yeah, they're 270. Oh, and they're still cranking this hard? I wonder what they're doing that I'm not doing. And now I actually have more of a sense of what's going on. Compare this with a high key, compare this with a low key, and now I have a sense of what I should be doing and what's obviously working versus what's not working. And I cannot stress enough how important that is, because these are just very hard pieces of information to obtain by just watching a singular guide. You start making mistakes and you don't know what they are. Yeah, you can get a coach or go to a guide or ask your favorite content creator, but sometimes the information is more nebulous. Speaking of nebulous, let's start talking about healers. On the healer side of things, and by the way, for tanks as well and raids, you might want to go through fight by fight. Maybe something's more single target oriented or AoE oriented. You want to find a build for that. Healers, I made a whole video about why HPS is a really, really bad metric. If you want to go watch that, you can. Here's the footnote though, and it's that realistically, it's a zero-sum game. You're only healing if there's something to heal. DPS basically always have something to hit. So just looking at the highest HPS doesn't tell you a whole story. And furthermore, especially when raid, you're going to get a lot of people parsing for high scores. This means that, yeah, they're getting crazy healing numbers, but they might not be working with their team very well, or they're overgeared for the content, or people aren't taking extra damage, or people are taking extra damage and they're healing it. So the information can be very, very skewed. Let's start with the dungeon side of things, as I think that's easier. Let's go back over to Magister's Terrace. And let's say you're trying to learn Mistweaver Monk, right? Okay, so we go into Mistweaver and we can see a lot of what's going on here, a lot of the best runs. Points, again, is just going to be time. I'm going to go click on this player because I'm almost positive it's Megaset, and she's one of my favorite Mistweaver players. Huge shout outs to her. So I also like to sort by damage done. And you might be going, Bowser, really? More healers doing damage? If a healer can do damage, the party was probably fine. If they're getting these kinds of times and this kind of score in a dungeon, and the healer was doing good damage, that meant that the healer didn't have a whole lot to heal, or that their damage contributed largely to their healing as well, and thus both numbers are closer together than one might think. I like looking through this. HPS again is a little dubious. I have a crazy clip in one of my last videos where I healed a Death Knight that took an astronomical amount of damage, and I hit some record healing for myself that I have not seen this expansion, especially in a dungeon. That's not a flex like, wow, Bowser, you healed so much. It's, oh my god, we pulled something we shouldn't have and the tank wasn't ready for it and we were able to stay alive. That was a mistake that survived. So it's cool that I did it, but it's not necessarily a flex as to how good a build is or anything like that. If you're just looking at me from a data analytics standpoint, that's a blip in a moment. We want to look at consistency, and that's why I do like looking at damage as well as healing here. We go to the summaries though, we can check out the stats. Here's the healer part of this, is you're going to want to really cross-reference some stats. I, as a Mistweaver, do fine whenever I have to heal. Not doing dungeons at the difficulty of Megaset, but Megaset runs high haste. I don't have a lot of haste gear because I've been playing a lot of Brewmaster. So I'm running a high mastery build, but we still scale well off of mastery, and it actually works out extremely well. I might run high mastery, high haste with my own build, but I can tell you right now, she's running high crit, or she's running good crit and verse with a high haste to really compound that damage to healing kind of contribution. And I get it. More is more here, and haste allows Mistweaver to really pop off and do more healing. This all makes sense, but healers have the widest a range of stats, and you're going to find healers with varying degrees of certain stats, and it's all personal preference and what's working for them in their composition. So don't think it's a hard and fast rule. However, if you want to get started and you trust Megaset, well then, these are probably decent stats to chase after. So it's okay to get started here. Just note that if somebody goes like, oh, I'm running a high mastery build, you're not supposed to be like, what are you doing? No one does that. Like, no, somebody probably does in healer land. Healers can get away with murder in terms of what they're running because their job is, again, not always available. They're not always healing. So how that healing transpires is going to be entirely based on how they play their heals, how their group takes damage, how they mitigate, and how they play around it. There might be a technical best in slot HPS setup, but if it loses damage, there's a time loss to be had there. So this subject is complicated. Use them as very much like a diving board, but I would not recommend just committing to these as like that's the only way to play, but it's a great starting point. And you can always trust Megaset, let me tell you. We can see item level, we can see what she has equipped, all of that good stuff. And just like before, we can go to damage done, and healer damage done is way easier to understand. Most of the damage was spinning crane kick. More on that in a moment. Jade Fire Stomp was doing a good amount of damage, and you might go, where's Jade Fire Stomp? Isn't that removed? Yeah, it's the Jade Fire Stomp on Thunder Focus T Rising Sun kick. And I know she's running the no Apex build, which means she gets those Jade Fire Stomps from her Rising Sun kicks, as well as gets those Empowered Dance of Chi-Ji spinning crane kicks, which is 400% more damage than normal. You can use spinning crane kick on its own. The fact that you get these boosted ones is crazy. So I already know a little bit about what's going on in the damage department. Celestial Conduit is a cooldown. It only got 12 casts. It did a lot of damage though for 12 casts. 4% of your dungeon's damage and you only pressed it 12 times? Hey, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. So it's important to know those things. But we can go over to healing and see a very similar amount of information. Again, we got 7.47 million out of that same Celestial Conduit. So while as a damaging move, it's doing good. As a healing move, it's doing great. And it's good to know that they fill both roles and that it's pretty useful. So a good place to put your Celestial Conduit and using it frequently seems to be a key to using that cooldown. Wave the Crane is the talent that Tiger Palm strikes twice, Blackout Kicks hit 2 additional targets. Its Spinning Crane Kick heals one nearby ally for 340% of the damage done. Note that this rolls every time it does damage, so you are essentially AoE healing. This means that Spinning Crane Kick is doing a lot of healing here, like a ton of healing. And note the overhealing. Overhealing isn't a damning number. It's just important to know if you are overhealing, if that's like something that you could be doing better or not. This is Spinning Crane Kick hitting enemies, you're gonna overheal. Totally fine. It's not even worth mentioning. And overhealing isn't usually considered into the HPS, so don't worry, you're not getting these two numbers confused by any means. This is all the stuff that didn't get calculated into practical HPS. So I know Way of the Crane, we can drop down to see various things like Ancient Teachings, what parts of Ancient Teachings are going off. This is a little more useful if we look at Invoke Chi-Ji, our 1-minute cooldown or 2-minute cooldown. Chi Cocoon actually did a lot of the work here. That's the little shield everyone gets when you pop Chi-Ji. So good to know that that little bubble is doing a good amount of work in its own right as well. And the Gusts of Mist are certainly helping too. So this is a pretty nice 1-minute cooldown, and I can see what parts of it are doing work for me. Renewing Mist is doing a lot. This is a heal over time. Whoa, and you only cast it 40 times? Yeah, it's because you only really need to cast it when you're ramping. Your Rising Sun kicks will get these out, and the Renewing Mist on the lowest health target with the talent Mist line is receiving more healing, like a lot more healing. This means that you only really need one out to get the job done, and your Rising Sun kick's going to do a good job of making sure there's at least one out. So if in between your Spinning Crane Kicks you're hitting Rising Sun kick on cooldown, you're going to get a lot of these out. So these extra casts are quite useful from, say, putting them out manually or ramping before a major healing event. You don't actually have to press it, but it still did a lot of work. And I guess that's important to know. Hey, I'm doing a lot of healing in the background. And that's very, very useful to understanding your triage or how to better heal or what's actually doing the work for you. If you then suddenly swap to Holy Priest, you might be wondering how you're healing people up, and you might notice that some people are lagging behind because you just haven't given them a heal in a minute, and thus you have to manually heal them a bit more. And that's something that on Mistweaver you were getting some background help with because of Renewing Mist in Mistline. So this rabbit hole goes unbelievably deep. However, we're not done there. There's even more to talk about. Let's go to raid. On the healing side here, there's a lot of things you can look at. You can look at execution, which is going to look for groups that didn't have any deaths. And you can look for somebody who in the top of execution, the top 50 breakdown, to see, you know, who's actually playing your spec and how well are they doing. And you might notice that there's a lot of Mistweavers, so we should be able to open some of these and get a Mistweaver. The reason this is important is that the composition had 4 healers on it. Now, you might not be healing Mythic Chron of the Cosmos. What if you're healing Heroic? You're going to see 2s here. This is kind of the crux of what the problem is. The problem is if you're trying to heal with a team of players and you're all under geared, and then one of you is trying to look at top players for healing, you're watching someone solo or duo heal an entire fight. That might not be realistic as to how your team is handling the mechanics, or your team's taking a lot of extra damage, or they're not playing perfectly and thus there is more damage to heal. So it might not make sense, and sometimes the heal parses are actually getting their team to take more damage so they could do more healing. There's a lot of information here that isn't necessarily giving you what you need to know. So do sort by healing and you'll get a sense of who's doing the most healing. But look at, there's PIs going out here. What's going on? Yeah, that's a lot of really weird information. So find your item level. Somebody who's healing Crown of the Cosmos Mythic at 269 to 271 item level. Oh, that's a really low item level to be healing this at. And look, there are some players doing it. So let's say I was trying to learn Preservation or Mistweaver. This looks like a carry or something. There's no way they're clearing the fight at 835. So this might be somebody who ran through it for some gear or something like that, right? No shame towards this player. Just, hey, you know what? If they're getting carried or they're getting geared on a character, that's great news. So we're going to want something practical here. Let's check out a Preservation player. We click in healing. Again, similar breakdown. We can see how well everyone did. I like to check to see how everyone did in this bracket. Like, yeah, that's pretty good. You're 271 item level and you're doing within this of the other healers. That's great, but you're all sharing the burden of the heals. So if everyone hits their healing assignments correctly, that should mean that everyone here is doing a similar amount of healing, maybe with some skewing. And yeah, some of that skewing is Mistweaver, who rot heals in the background, so they might be sniping some of the heals on players, and that's totally fine. This is a good parse, so we can use this both for Mistweaver and we can use this for Preservation, and we can better understand how they did their healing. Marithra's Blessing and Reversion doing most of the work here, Dream Breath doing a lot, and Temporal Anomaly doing way more than I actually expected. That's pretty cool to know. And of course, when it comes to stats, raid stats tend to look different. Running a good chunk of haste in crit with a large amount of mastery is the highest method of healing on Preservation. But I'll tell you right now, no versatility in dungeons feels really bad. If your mastery ever falls off, you have next to no healing going for you. So it's nice to offset that in the dungeon environment to having more versatility and more evened out stats, because the mastery still provides the highest amount of HPS, but if you're not triggering your mastery, then you're healing significantly less. This is why it's so complicated, and it can be so hard to find a consistency between dungeons and raids and different players when it comes to healers. So just be advised of that information. But I recommend cross-referencing, and again, find parses. There are going to be people who are playing on teams who are doing less healing than their teammates. That's because, again, whoever gets to it first is fine. And fight length matters too. This is an 8-minute something fight, but imagine if it was 4 minutes. The healing numbers and the damage numbers would look a lot different because the fight happened faster. It might be higher, it might be lower, and that can be really hard to figure out. So just make sure you're taking the time to really look through these things and figure out, okay, like, is this a recognizable parse to me? Does this look like a normal healer playing, or is this somebody giga blasting, solo healing an entire raid? There's an entire culture of heal parsing and going for high scores, and that's not a bad thing. But when it comes to parses, actually, we'll just say parses in general so that I can mark this in the timestamps for anyone who needs to know. When it comes to any kind of parse, and we'll just use this log as an example, these parses are based on against all of the other parses that are up and available within your class, within your respective roles. So if we go to healing, you're gonna see some really funny numbers. Like this is a 97 healing parse for a frost mage. It's 10k HPS, right? That's very funny, but obviously frost mages doing a lot of healing means good defensive usage, whereas a Mistweaver getting a lot of healing means that they were doing really well in the fight and there was a lot to heal. So parses can get a little confusing. On the damage side of things, it's a bit more of a high scoreboard, especially in raids where raids are fixed fights, so to say, right? So you have an assignment and you know what you're looking for. Again, you might want to look at damage done to a boss or bosses, not so much adds in a fight, because that can give you really messy numbers and can make it really hard to parse. But when it comes to these high scores, it gives you an idea, right? If you're doing a 44 parse, that's fine. That's great, right? There are great parses here that, you know what? This clears a fight. This cleared a fight, obviously, right? Like, we're not about to talk smack about this player. They cleared. They did this fight and they did it and they survived and they made it out probably with loot and whatnot, right? Or at least an achievement. This is good. So I don't think that this is a bad thing. And a lot of players see a number like this and go, oh, dude, I'm gray parsing. Okay, but you're still doing good, more than good enough to clear the fight. Thank you all so much for watching. I know this one was a little long-winded, but hopefully it gave you the guidance that you need in order to start understanding logs. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know down in the comment section, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care, friends.